welcome to this review of my Lofree Flow keyboard. Apologies, my cold hasn't gone completely, so I sound a bit different from normal. This was a donation from Lofree themselves. Like the previous board I covered, the Wombat Kailh, this is a low-profile 75% keyboard that I accepted to pad out the reference material a bit more. However, this is a very different focus than the Kailh, so it should be interesting to take a look at. Whereas the Kailh was more of an RGB show designed for Apples, this has a slightly more traditional keyboard design philosophy. It comes with spherical, if low profile, more standard looking keycaps, much less intense backlighting, although it is side lit in addition to the per key lighting, a metal chassis, I'll get back to that in a bit, and gasket mounting, which is rather rare for a low profile keyboard. So in terms of design philosophy, it feels more like a flattened out custom keyboard than an RGB show Mac one. One thing they did not fuck up, as the Kailh did, is the layout. This uses a much more conventional layout, rather than the awful Lenovo one that the Kailh used, which has an FN key at the bottom left here, which rendered it more or less unusable. 75% keyboards tend to have highly variable layouts, and so they can be a bit hit or miss, but this one is fine. I had no problems adjusting to it. It can be used on Windows and Mac, and both wired and wireless, for which there is a switch. I much prefer it if such functions have a physical switch rather than a keyboard shortcut, to be honest. In this case, it's only one of the two. It's located at the back, where the USB-C port is also located. And now that we're here on the back, there is also the feet, which are super weird. It's these metal loop things with some rubber non-slip pads on them, and the feet are bolted into the chassis. I have no idea what the reasoning behind this was. I think it's just done for looks or something. Personally, I don't think it looks that great, and it's also non-adjustable, and you can't fold them in so that they lie flush with the case. But they do seem pretty sturdy, whatever floats your boat, I guess. The switches are also different. They're not Gator on low profile like on the Kailh, but Kailh Shadow switches instead. These are a collaboration between Kailh and Lofree, and they're available as linear and tactile. There is also a clicky version, but that's not listed on the buy, curiously. You have to get those separately. The board is hot swappable though, so you can easily put them in if you want. Keep in mind that keycap mounts and pinouts aren't as standardized on low profile switches as they are on normal profile ones, so your options aren't limitless. Compared to the Gatorons, the travel is a tiny bit shorter, 2.8 rather than 3mm, and they're made entirely out of POM rather than just the stem, and thus they're advertised as self-lubricating, as POM has a lower coefficient of friction. It uses the same MX stem though. This one came with the tactile ones. It's almost completely linear, but they're reasonably smooth. It's not bad or anything, but in terms of tactility, it's pretty piss poor. Frankly, I'm embarrassed that they dare market them as such. I prefer full travel switches to low profile ones myself, and if I do use low profile, I like click bars, but your mileage may vary, of course. I guess they're okay. It's not so easy to make a good switch out of such a short travel, so your options when designing such a switch are limited. Personally, I'd have gone for Jade, Chocks or something, or their own Wizard switches. I'd like to have given them a try, which are apparently also based on click bars, but hey, that's just me. One problem I often have with low-profile keyboards is that it's very easy to make mistakes by hitting two keys at once, but in this case they left enough space between the key tops, so that wasn't really the case here. They could have put them a bit more apart, I think, but it works fine like it is now too. It's something that I addressed in my earlier low-profile keyboard reviews as well. Keycaps that are completely flat are often way too close to each other, giving rise to this problem, which is why you want tapered keycaps like this. Speaking of, the keycaps are moderately thin but made out of PBT. They're MX mount and spherically sculpted, although the sculpting is pretty shallow of course. The lettering looks quite okay, although it's rather small. I think it's overall a pretty clean looking keyboard, not very ostentatious. The monochrome white only backlight helps in this regard as well, although the side lighting is RGB. Now, this keyboard is marketed as having an all-aluminium chassis. Both the case and this frame here are apparently metal. Now, I'm sure they're right, but to be honest, it feels and sounds like it's just plastic, really. The weight is 566 grams, or in goat yoga units, 19.9651 Oz, which is a lot heavier than a true plastic keyboard would be, but I just can't shake the feeling that it's more flimsy than the term all-aluminium keyboard would lead you to believe. It's probably fine, it just doesn't feel as premium as it sounds. It's very hard to see on camera, but there are already also 2 small dents in the bottom case, which wouldn't have occurred if it had been plastic, I think. Honestly, to me it feels more like they made it out of a small amount of metal just to be able to say they made it out of metal, and not because it really adds or changes anything about the keyboard. There's only so much you can do with a keyboard this thin, I guess, so maybe the concept of a custom-like keyboard isn't a great match for a device like this. Overall though, it's a decent keyboard. I really didn't mind my time using this. There's just not much to complain about this, I think. The MSRP is $200, which is ridiculous in my opinion, but the super early bird tier on Kickstarter isn't full yet, and that's $129, which is more reasonable. Small low-profile keyboards like this are surprisingly expensive, I found, which I don't really understand, because for $125 you can buy a new full-size Model M from Unicomp, and that's made with more steel than this has aluminium, I think, but whatever. If you want a small low-profile keyboard, a full-size Model M is not what you're going to be looking for. That's it for this review. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and following is a typing demonstration of me typing on this keyboard.